They raised me to be small, quiet, and grateful. That was their first mistake. I'm Cara Mitchell, 28, the black sheep of the illustrious, image-obsessed Mitchell family of Boston. They thought they knew me, the invisible daughter, with her unsuitable hobbies. They thought they could dismiss my dreams, redirect my passions, and ultimately break my spirit when I refused to conform. They had no idea the storm they were about to unleash, or that their black sheep was about to become the one thing they worship most, a titan of industry. For years, my world was defined by the stifling weight of gender inequality that permeated our grand Brookline estate, a gilded cage where sons were cultivated for conquest and daughters for advantageous alliances. I was the anomaly, the girl fascinated by the precise logic of code, while my brother James was groomed for Wall Street, and my sister Madison for a life as a political spouse. My current success as the founder and CEO of Secure Health, a multi-million-dollar healthcare tech company, stands as a testament to a transformation forged in the fires of their dismissal. But what I didn't know as I navigated their carefully constructed labyrinth of expectations was that my silence, my desperate attempts to earn their approval, was costing me everything. There was a moment, a single exquisitely timed, earth-shattering moment when the facade crumbled, when their world and mine collided and everything changed. If you're a woman who's ever felt invisible in your own family, whose ambitions have been patronizingly patted on the head, while your brothers were given roadmaps to the kingdom, this story is for you. This isn't just about me. It's about the quiet resilience, the burning embers of defiance that live in so many daughters. This story will show you how to reclaim your power, your voice, and your inherent worth, even when the architects of your upbringing become the gatekeepers of your potential. Because the woman I was becoming could not tolerate what the girl had been forced to accept. The Mitchell family estate in Brookline was less a home and more a meticulously curated museum of dynastic ambition. Its sprawling colonial architecture, the manicured lawns stretching towards the perfectly pruned rose gardens, the hushed reverence for ancestral portraits staring down from paneled walls. It all whispered of legacy, of a specific narrow definition of success. My earliest memories are steeped in the subtle, pervasive understanding of this hierarchy. James, 4 years my senior, was the undisputed crown prince. His path was paved with the finest materials, Phillips, Exeter, Harvard summers interning at father's prestigious investment bank, Goldman Sachs. He was encouraged to be bold, to take risks, to develop a killer instinct. His toys were complex building sets, chemistry kits that occasionally resulted in minor explosions met with indulgent chuckles about his scientific curiosity, and by his early teens, access to a starter stock portfolio. I, on the other hand, was the recipient of protection. My world was meant to be soft, curated, and ornamental. While James was gifted miniature briefcases, I received collections of porcelain dolls with vacant stares and elaborate tea sets. My mother, Eleanor, a woman whose own formidable intellect had been meticulously channeled into becoming Boston's preeminent socialite and charity gala organizer, would often tell me, "Cara dear, a lady's true power lies in her grace, her connections, and her ability to manage a household impeccably. Ambition in a woman should be elegant, never overt." My natural inclinations were a source of quiet consternation. I wasn't drawn to the piano lessons or the ballet classes Mother insisted upon. Instead, I was captivated by the inner workings of things. I'd dismantle old radios, much to the housekeeper, Margot's dismay, just to see the intricate dance of wires and circuits. When Father brought home our first hulking desktop computer, I was mesmerized. While James used it for games, I saw a universe of logic waiting to be unlocked. This fascination, however, was treated as a quaint, if slightly bewildering, eccentricity. "Darling, why don't you help me with the seating chart for the symphony benefit?" Mother would coax gently, steering me away from the glowing screen. Such a vital skill understanding social architecture. James's transgressions were framed as learning experiences. That scientific experiment that scorched a significant patch of the croquet lawn, he's got spirit. Thomas, Mother would say to Father, a rare note of indulgence in her voice. He's just like you were at that age. But when I, at 13, managed to write a simple program to catalog Mother's extensive collection of antique silver, it was met with a strained smile and the suggestion that I might enjoy a calligraphy class more. So much more refined, dear. The laptop I finally received after months of pleading came with the implicit understanding that it was for ladylike pursuits, emailing approved friends, researching art history papers, certainly not for delving into the unfeminine world of coding. Madison, 2 years my junior, was a quick study. She absorbed the unspoken rules of the Mitchell dynasty like a sponge. Beautiful, articulate, and possessing an almost preternatural poise, she understood that her currency lay in her charm and her strategic alignment with the family's ambitions. She excelled in debate club, not out of a fiery passion for justice, but to hone the skills necessary for the political salons Mother envisioned, her gracing as the wife of a future senator or ambassador. Madison, Father would often say, with a proud clap on her shoulder, knows how the world works. The unspoken addendum, unlike Cara, always hung heavy in the air. I often wondered about the life Mother might have lived had she been born a generation later, or perhaps into a different family. Aunt Patricia, Father's younger sister, a tenured literature professor at Wellesley, and my secret ally once let slip during a rare, quiet moment. Your mother, Cara, had a mind like a steel trap. She adored archaeology, could have rewritten history books. But that sharp mind had been polished and redirected its energy poured into guest lists, charity auctions, and maintaining the flawless veneer of the Mitchell name. Eleanor, like so many women of her station and generation, had learned to meticulously dim her own light, perhaps to the point where she'd forgotten its original wattage. My early acts of rebellion were furtive and small. I'd hoard computer magazines, reading them under the covers with a flashlight. I taught myself rudimentary programming languages from borrowed library books, the glow of the monitor in the dead of night my only confidant. Discovery always led to the same gentle, disappointed reprimands. Cara, this obsession isn't becoming, Mother would sigh. No young man of good standing will be impressed by your ability to fiddle with those machines. Father, sterner and more direct, would simply state, focus on what matters, Cara. Build a presentable life. The message, repeated in 1,000 subtle and overt ways, was clear. James was to be an architect of Fortune Madison, a curator of influence. I was an unknown quantity, a deviation from the blueprint, a puzzle they preferred not to solve. The golden cage of our Brookline existence was opulent, but its bars were forged from generations of patriarchal expectation, a system designed to channel female potential into carefully prescribed supportive roles. And I, the good daughter starved for a sliver of their validation, began the slow, painful process of folding myself into ever smaller, more acceptable shapes, desperately hoping to one day fit. But what I didn't know was that my silence was costing me everything. The process of becoming smaller was insidious, a slow leak of self rather than a sudden puncture. By the time I was choosing a college major, the years of subtle and not-so-subtle discouragement had taken their toll. My heart sang for computer science, for the elegant logic of algorithms, and the thrill of building something from nothing. But the chorus of familial concern, Cara, it's such a male-dominated field. Are you sure you'll be comfortable? From Mother. You need something that cultivates your softer skills. From Father, and even Madison chiming in with, don't you want a career where you can actually, meet people, wore me down. I settled for communications with a minor in art history. It was respectable. It was safe. It generated approving nods at family dinners. It was also a betrayal of my core self, a decision that left a lingering ache of dissatisfaction. My tentative forays into the professional world were met with the same lukewarm, redirecting guidance. When I excitedly proposed a small web design business after graduation, a way to combine my artistic sensibilities with my technical skills, Father had patted my hand. A charming little hobby, Cara. But you need a career. I can make some calls, find you a placement in a reputable PR firm. something with structure, with a clear path. An internship I secured at a dynamic, if small, tech startup in Kendall Square was met with raised eyebrows. "So far from home, dear." Mother fretted conveniently, forgetting James had spent a semester abroad in Hong Kong. And startups are so volatile. James is already on the analyst fast track at the bank, a much more secure future. Ah, James, the golden child whose path was perpetually smoothed, his occasional professional stumbles, a poorly advised trade that resulted in a not insignificant loss, quietly covered by father, a client entertainment evening that bordered on scandalous during his MBA dismissed as letting off steam, were always framed as valuable learning experiences. "He's got to test the waters, Eleanor," father would say, with a mixture of exasperation and pride. "That's how men learn to lead." My successes, however hard-won, were treated as quaint anomalies, or more often simply overlooked. I remember winning a regional award for a digital humanities project I'd poured my soul into during my senior year. When I eagerly shared the news, Mother smiled vaguely. "That's lovely, dear. Did I tell you the Astors have confirmed for the Children's Hospital Gala such a coup?" The subject was deftly changed, my small triumph evaporating like morning mist. My internal landscape became a barren echo chamber of their critiques. Am I truly cut out for the demanding world of tech? Perhaps they see something I don't. Maybe a quiet, predictable life is what I'm truly suited for. People-pleasing became my armor and my prison. I'd find myself nodding in agreement during Father's pronouncements on geopolitical affairs. I privately questioned or complimenting Madison on social triumphs that felt vacuous to me. The effort to maintain this facade was exhausting. There were moments, sharp and sudden, when the real Cara threatened to break through. I recall one Thanksgiving dinner James holding forth on the inevitable irrelevance of a certain emerging social media platform. I had just read several insightful analyses predicting its explosive growth, its potential to reshape communication. The counter-arguments backed by data and logical projection burned on my tongue. I opened my mouth a polite, "Actually, James, some analysts are projecting," forming in my mind. And then I saw it. Father's preemptively indulgent smile towards James' mother's subtle glance towards me that clearly telegraphed "don't rock the boat," and James's own expression of supreme, unassailable confidence. The memory of a previous attempt to contribute to a serious discussion which had earned me a patronizing, "That's sweet, Cara, but leave the strategy to us, eh?" from James, and a dismissive wave from Father flooded back. The words died in my throat. The risk of their collective condescension, the familiar sting of being trivialized, was too high a price. So I smiled, nodded, and let the moment pass. Another small piece of myself chipped away. The psychological toll was a constant low hum of anxiety, a knot of inadequacy that tightened its grip whenever a family event loomed. I developed nervous habits fiddling with my necklace, unnecessarily smoothing my skirt, tucking a non-existent stray hair behind my ear, all physical manifestations of my desperate desire to be invisible, yet approved of a walking contradiction. I dissect conversations for days, searching for missteps, for moments where I might have seemed too opinionated, too intelligent, too much. Mother, in her own carefully manicured way, perpetuated the cycle. Her advice on my wardrobe: a more classic silhouette, Cara less more severe, my choice of friends. Are they really our kind of people, dear? And my conversation topics: best to let the men handle the financial talk, it can be so dreadfully dull for us, can it? Was a constant reinforcement of my perceived inadequacy. Madison, already perfecting her role as the family's social ambassador, would offer helpful critiques delivered with a dazzling smile, each one a velvet-gloved punch. "Cara, darling, you really should network more with influential people. My friend's father is on the board of the MFA. I could introduce you. If you had something you know relevant to discuss." But beneath the layers of conditioned compliance, a spark of awareness began to glow. This wasn't just about me being a difficult daughter or an unconventional spirit. This was a systemic pattern, a deeply ingrained bias that valued one type of ambition, one gender's voice over another. The unfairness of it all began to curdle into a quiet resentment, a persistent sense of injustice. Why were James's pronouncements treated as gospel, while my carefully researched opinions were airily dismissed? Why was his ambition a virtue, and mine a character flaw? The breaking point wasn't a single event, but the culmination of 1,000 tiny diminishments. It was the growing, suffocating dread that accompanied the engraved invitation to the annual Mitchell Family Foundation dinner. This event, more than any other, was the stage for my public vivisection, the annual audit of my perceived failures. There was an unusual tension in my mother's voice on the phone earlier that week when confirming my attendance, a clipped, almost formal tone from my father when he'd briefly inquired if I was still fiddling with that computer nonsense. Something was brewing, and my gut, now acutely attuned to the subtle currents of Mitchell family politics, told me it wasn't just about James's latest promotion or Madison's upcoming internship with a federal judge. As I selected a deliberately modest, almost self-effacing outfit for the dinner, a navy sheath dress that screamed, "I don't want to cause any trouble," a cold knot of foreboding tightened in my stomach. Little did I know, the woman I was becoming, the one who had been secretly, painstakingly building an empire in the shadows of their disapproval, was about to make her first thunderous appearance. The shrinking woman was on the verge of an explosion. The drive to the Brookline estate was a journey into the heart of my anxiety. Each familiar landmark, the imposing stone gates, the long, winding driveway flanked by ancient oaks, the first glimpse of the grand colonial facade lit like a stage ratcheted up the tension. The annual Mitchell Family Foundation dinner, my personal Golgotha. I parked my unassuming sedan, a relic from my early Secure Health days, amongst the gleaming phalanx of Porsches, Bentleys, and Range Rovers. Taking a shaky breath, I tried to summon the practiced veneer of polite detachment I usually wore to these affairs. Smile, nod, offer vague updates, and for God's sake, Cara, don't say anything that could be construed as controversial or worse, ambitious. As I stepped into the cavernous marble foyer, Margot, our housekeeper of over 30 years, greeted me. Her usually warm smile, a small beacon of normalcy in this house, seemed tinged with a hint of sorrow today, a fleeting shadow in her kind eyes that I couldn't quite decipher. "Miss Cara," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Welcome." It pricked at my unease, a tiny sharp signal that something was indeed different tonight. I was heading towards the solarium, the usual gathering spot for pre-dinner drinks, when I heard voices from the adjoining library, its heavy oak doors slightly ajar. My mother's distinct, impeccably modulated tones, sharp with frustration. "Honestly, Patricia, I just don't know what to do with her. 28 years old and still hasn't figured things out. This ridiculous computer thing she's doing, it's going nowhere. Thomas is at his wit's end." Then James's voice, smooth as expensive whiskey laced with its customary condescension. "She'll come around, Mother, especially after tonight. Once the trust fund top-ups officially stop, reality will bite. She needs a proper job, something with stability. Maybe I can get her an admin role at the firm, keep her busy out of trouble." An admin role. The casual, brutal dismissal of my life's work, of the countless sleepless nights. The sacrifices, the sheer grit it had taken to build Secure Health from a mere idea into a burgeoning reality sent a shockwave of cold fury through me. I paused my hand on the doorknob to the solarium, my breath catching in my throat. I smoothed my dress, plastered on a smile that felt like it might crack my face, and headed toward the familiar sound of crystal glasses clinking and polite, insincere laughter. The solarium, a grand, glass-walled room overflowing with my mother's prize-winning orchids and uncomfortable antique furniture, was already buzzing with the usual suspects, distant wealthy relatives, and father's business associates, all assessing each other with discreet predatory glances. Madison, a vision in a Chanel dress that probably cost more than my first year's operating budget for Secure Health, detached herself from a group. "Cara, you look comfortable?" she said, her gaze flicking dismissively over my simple navy sheath. Very appropriate for someone in your position. Her smile was radiant, her condescension flawless. Before I could dredge up a suitably neutral response, she leaned in her voice a conspiratorial whisper. James and I were just saying, if you're serious about finally getting your life on track, we could make some introductions. James knows a lovely woman who runs a very stable little art gallery, or I could connect you with a PR firm that specializes in less demanding clients. The sheer unadulterated gall of it. Thanks, Madison. I managed my voice dangerously quiet, but I'm quite satisfied with my current endeavors. Her perfectly plucked eyebrow arched a silent testament to her disbelief in my endeavors. Just then, Aunt Patricia swept towards me a vibrant splash of bohemian chic in a room of muted power pastels. Cara, darling, there you are. She enveloped me in a warm hug that smelled of old books and expensive French perfume. Ignore them all, she whispered in my ear, her grip on my arm a little tighter than usual. And be careful tonight, dear. I sense something. Thomas and Eleanor have been in a huddle all afternoon. Her eyes sharp and knowing held a warning. Dinner was an ordeal served on the family's ancestral china at the ridiculously long mahogany table. The air crackled with an unspoken agenda. I caught my father exchange a quick, almost imperceptible nod with my mother after the soup course. James, too, seemed unusually stiff, avoiding my gaze, a smug little smile playing on his lips whenever he thought I wasn't looking. The updates began the annual ritual of showcasing the family's approved successes. James pontificated at length about a complex derivative strategy his team at Goldman Sachs was pioneering. Madison, with practiced modesty, detailed her recent triumphs on the Harvard Law Review and her upcoming clerkship with a highly influential federal judge, a crucial stepping stone for her aspiring political spouse ambitions. Then silence. All eyes turned to me. Father cleared his throat expectantly. Actually, I began, my voice carefully neutral. Secure Health. The healthcare software company I founded is progressing well. We recently concluded a major pilot program with Massachusetts General Hospital, and the initial data is exceeding all our projections. We also won the New England Tech Innovators Award last month. I tried to inject a note of quiet pride of concrete achievement. That's nice, dear. Mother interjected smoothly, her smile as brittle as spun sugar. She turned to Mrs. Vanderbilt Smythe on her right. Penelope, darling, did you hear James is tipped for an early vice presidency? Such drive, just like his father. My update, my hard-won successes were swept aside as effortlessly as crumbs from the damask tablecloth. The familiar burn of dismissal was sharper this time, fueled by the overheard conversation, by Madison's patronizing offer, by the palpable sense of a preordained judgment hanging over me. But alongside the hurt, a cold, hard anger was beginning to solidify in my chest. For years, I'd accepted their narrative, no more. After the creme brulee was cleared, Father tapped his water glass with a spoon. The room fell into an anticipatory hush. This was it, the moment the entire evening had been building towards. Cara, he began, his voice carrying the weighty authority of a man accustomed to absolute obedience. Your mother and I have had some serious discussions regarding your current trajectory. He paused, his gaze sweeping over me, cold and appraising. We feel we've been more than patient, more than supportive of your unconventional choices. Mother chimed in, her voice laced with practiced concern. We love you, darling, you know that, but this healthcare software gimmick you're so fixated on, it's simply not a viable future. It's going nowhere. You're nearly 30, Cara. It's time you faced reality. James leaned back in his chair, a look of poorly concealed triumph on his face. Madison affected an expression of sorrowful sympathy that didn't quite reach her calculating eyes. Therefore, Father continued, his voice dropping to a tone of finality, as of the 1st of next month, we will be cutting you off completely. All financial support will cease. No more allowance, No more access to the family trust supplements. It's time for you to stand on your own 2 feet, Cara, and make some sensible adult decisions about your future. Consider this our way of motivating you." The words delivered with such cold clinical precision sucked the air from my lungs, cutting me off. Their motivation was a thinly veiled ultimatum: conform or be cast out. For a dizzying second, I envisioned their stunned faces if I revealed I hadn't touched their allowance in over 2 years, that Secure Health was not only solvent, but actively generating revenue, that my unconventional choice was on the cusp of something monumental. The sheer calculated cruelty of their timing, their utter blindness to who I had become, left me momentarily speechless. My hands clenched into fists beneath the table. This wasn't about money. It was about control. It was about breaking me. And then, as if summoned by the sheer audacity of their pronouncement, my phone, tucked away in my small evening bag on the floor beside my chair, began to vibrate. A frantic, insistent buzzing, Alicia's emergency signal. My heart hammered against my ribs. Ignore it. Suffer their scorn in silence, or answer and face the inevitable explosion for prioritizing my little hobby, my gimmick, over this solemn family decree. I reached for my bag. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady, cutting through the heavy silence. Mother gasped a sharp, scandalized sound. Ignoring her, I pulled out my phone. "Alicia." It had to be critical. "Alicia, what's wrong?" I kept my voice low, but in the charged atmosphere, every syllable seemed to magnify. Alicia's voice, usually so calm and collected, was a torrent of barely suppressed elation, crackling with an energy that seemed to fill the opulent dining room. "Cara, oh my God, Cara, you are not going to believe this SoftBank. They just wired it. The term sheet is signed, executed, and the first tranche is in $40 million, Cara. They're in at a $100 million pre-IPO valuation. $40 million. $100 million valuation." The numbers, vast and incandescent, detonated in the stunned silence of the Mitchell dining room. Alicia, in her delirious excitement, had practically shouted into the phone. Every fork was frozen mid-air. Every eye was locked on me, a tableau of shock and disbelief. "And Cara!" Alicia bulldozed on her voice, somehow even louder, practically vibrating with triumph. "Get this, the lead underwriter for the IP. They're already discussing Goldman Sachs wants in your father's firm. They're practically begging to lead it. They called it a game changer." Goldman Sachs. My father's firm. The irony was so potent, so breathtakingly, exquisitely perfect, it was almost painful. A hysterical laugh threatened to bubble up. I took a slow, deliberate breath. The simmering anger and years of suppressed frustration, now coalescing into something new, something vast and electrifying, pure, unadulterated power. "Alicia," I said, my voice calm, cool, and carrying with perfect clarity in the tomb-like silence. "That is exceptionally good news. Thank you for letting me know. I'll call you back shortly." I ended the call and placed the phone gently on the polished mahogany table. The silence that fell wasn't just absolute. It was a void, a vacuum, where all their previous pronouncements and certainties had been sucked away. My father's fork clattered from his nerveless fingers onto his Sèvres china plate with a deafening clang. Mother's hand, midway to her baccarat wineglass, froze, spilling a few crimson drops of Cabernet onto the pristine white damask tablecloth like startled blood. Madison's perfectly lipsticked mouth hung agape, an almost comical O of utter disbelief. James looked like he'd been poleaxed. It was Father who finally broke the spell, his voice a hoarse, strangled whisper. "Cara, what in God's name was that?" I met his gaze no longer. The shrinking daughter, no longer the family disappointment, but the founder and CEO of a $100 million company about to be taken public by his own firm. A small, genuine smile, the first truly unburdened smile I'd worn in this house in years, touched my lips. That Father, I said, my voice ringing with a newfound clarity and strength that astonished even myself. Was my healthcare software gimmick. It appears it's going somewhere after all. My awakening wasn't just an internal shift. It was a seismic event that had just sent shockwaves through the foundations of the Mitchell dynasty. And in that moment, watching their carefully constructed world shatter, I tasted the first intoxicating sip of true, unadulterated liberation. The battle was far from over, but the first decisive engagement had just been spectacularly, undeniably won. Immediately, a babble of voices erupted. 100 million! Mother gasped, her hand flying to her pearls. Goldman Sachs! James stammered, his face ashen. Father just stared, his expression a warring canvas of shocked disbelief and something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it grudging respect or sheer terror? So about that financial cutoff, I continued, my voice still calm, enjoying the chaos I had unintentionally yet so satisfyingly sown. Perhaps we can consider it moot. Madison, ever the opportunist, was the first to recover. Cara, that's incredible. We had no idea. You should have told us. We could have helped. Helped, I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Like offering me an admin job, James, or a position in a less demanding PR firm, Madison. Their faces flushed. Father finally found his voice, though it was strained. Cara, this changes things obviously. We need to discuss this. As a family, perhaps I could offer some strategic guidance with this IPO. My connections at Goldman are, as you know, unparalleled. Yes, Father, I'm sure they are, I said. But Secure Health has a brilliant CFO and a board of experienced advisors. We're quite capable of managing our own strategy. The same strategy that got us this far without your unparalleled connections, I might add. Mother tried a different tack. Darling, we're your parents. We only want what's best for you. This is wonderful news, of course, but you'll need support. Family support. Family relationships are more important than momentary disagreements. Father added a touch of his old authoritative tone, returning though it lacked its usual conviction. I stood up, picking up my evening bag. Aunt Patricia, who had been watching the entire exchange with an expression of immense quiet satisfaction, also rose. Aunt Patricia, would you mind giving me a lift? My gimmick seems to have outgrown my current mode of transport. It would be my absolute pleasure, dear, she said, her eyes twinkling. Cara, don't be hasty. My father's voice was strained, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Was it fear or a dawning, terrifying respect? The world out there, it's not as simple as your computer screens. You'll need us. Perhaps, I said, pausing at the door. Madison, you mentioned you were looking for speakers for your political fundraiser, for your future husband's campaign. Madison brightened instantly. Yes, oh, Cara, would you? A success story like yours, a woman in tech, it would be phenomenal. I'll check my schedule, I said politely, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips as I met Aunt Patricia's twinkling eyes with a subtle wink. But I should warn you, my speaking fee for political events starts at $50,000. Payable in advance, of course. To the Mitchell Innovation Foundation I'm establishing for young women in STEM. Madison's jaw dropped again. With that, Aunt Patricia and I walked out of the solarium, leaving behind a scene of stunned silence, shattered expectations, and the delicious, undeniable aroma of tables decisively turned. The cage wasn't just open, I had taken the door off its hinges. The triumphant exit from the Mitchell family dinner was a watershed moment, but the armor I wore that night wasn't forged in an instant. It was the product of years of clandestine labor, quiet defiance, and relentless self-belief hammered into shape in the crucible of their indifference. Secure Health wasn't a lottery win. It was a meticulously constructed fortress built brick by brick, line of code by line of code, in the shadows of their grand pronouncements about my lack of direction. My journey began in a cramped Somerville apartment fueled by instant ramen and an unshakable conviction that I was onto something. While my family envisioned me languishing in a suitable but unfulfilling job, I was spending 16-hour days hunched over a secondhand laptop teaching myself advanced programming, sketching out algorithms on coffee-stained napkins, and immersing myself in the arcane complexities of healthcare data regulations. Every spare dollar went into server costs, software licenses, and attending obscure tech conferences where I often found myself one of a handful of women in a sea of men. It was there, amidst the jargon and the palpable energy of innovation, that I began to find my voice, to test my ideas, to realize that my unfeminine obsession was in fact a powerful tool for change. As Secure Health gained its first tentative traction, a successful beta test with a local clinic, a glowing review from an early adopter physician, I moved to a slightly larger, though still unglamorous loft in South Boston. This became my war room. Whiteboards covered every wall, scrawled with user flow diagrams, marketing strategies, and funding projections. I learned to pitch, to negotiate, to build a team. The rejections were numerous and often brutal, each one a fresh sting, but each one also a lesson. Too niche, one VC said. You, a young woman, expect to disrupt the healthcare monolith? Another scoffed, barely concealing his disdain. But for every 10 dismissals, there was one flicker of interest, one investor who saw the potential I knew was there. My greatest strategic decision was bringing Alicia Thompson on board. We met at a Women in Tech panel, a small, underattended event where I'd nervously presented a very early iteration of Secure Health. Alicia, then a sharp, ambitious operations manager at a mid-sized software firm, approached me afterwards, her eyes bright with an intensity that mirrored my own. What you're building, she'd said, cutting straight through the pleasantries, isn't just an app. It's a fundamental shift in patient empowerment. I want in. She didn't just see the code, she saw the crusade. Alicia became my co-founder, my COO, the pragmatic operational anchor to my often visionary, sometimes chaotic energy. She was the first true member of my tribe, the chosen family that would become my unwavering support system. Together, we handpicked our early team at Secure Health, a diverse, brilliant, and fiercely loyal group of engineers, designers, and healthcare experts who believed in our mission as passionately as we did. Our eventual move to a vibrant, open-plan office in the heart of Kendall Square felt like a declaration: we were here, we were serious, and we were building the future. The internal fortification was a parallel, equally crucial battle. Years of being told I was too much or not enough had left deep fissures in my self-esteem. I started therapy, a decision I initially kept secret, fearing it would be seen as another sign of weakness by my family. My therapist, a wise, empathetic woman named Dr. Evans, became my guide through the labyrinth of my own conditioned responses. She helped me deconstruct the gaslighting, the subtle ways my family had made me doubt my own perceptions, my own intelligence. Cara, she'd say gently but firmly, your ambition isn't a character flaw, it's your engine. Their inability to see your worth is about their limitations, not yours. I devoured books on feminist theory, on assertiveness, on building resilience. Each page felt like another layer of armor being riveted into place. Confidence wasn't a sudden revelation. It was earned one small victory at a time, closing our first significant enterprise contract, securing a small angel investment from a female-led fund. Watching a patient testimonial video where someone described how Secure Health had simplified their complex medical journey. These weren't just business milestones. They were affirmations of my worth, my capability. I learned to trust my gut, to defend my decisions with data and conviction even when seasoned executives tried to intimidate or dismiss me. Moments of doubt still ambushed me, of course, usually late at night when the office was quiet and the weight of responsibility felt immense. What if they're right? What if this all comes crashing down? What if I'm just a girl playing at being a CEO? In those dark hours, I'd call Alicia, who would invariably talk me off the ledge with her unshakable pragmatism. Or I'd reread emails from users reminding myself of the real-world impact we were having. Behind my smile, the one I still sometimes wore like a mask in uncomfortable social situations, a warrior was indeed being born tempered by setbacks fueled by purpose. Practicing boundary setting started with small, almost imperceptible acts of defiance in my interactions with my family. Politely declining mother's unsolicited advice on my non-existent social life without offering a lengthy apologetic explanation, stating a differing opinion on a current event during a family phone call, even if it directly contradicted father's pronouncements, and then not backing down when challenged. These were minor skirmishes, but each one felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of lost territory. My family's attempts to reel me back into their orbit, to fit me back into the Cara-shaped box they'd constructed, were persistent even before the dinner table detonation. Mother would periodically send me clippings about suitable young men from good families or brochures for art history courses. James, in his role as the dutiful and slightly smug older brother, would call occasionally, his tone a mixture of concern and condescension. "Still tinkering with that little computer project, Karas?" he'd asked a few months before the dinner. "You know Dad's really hoping you'll find some real direction soon. He worries, you know." Tinkering. That's what they thought my life's work amounted to. Little did they know the tinkerer was building an empire, forging an armor of competence, resilience, and unshakable self-belief that would soon prove impervious to their dismissals and ultimately their belated opportunistic attempts at embrace. The woman who walked out of that dining room with Aunt Patricia wasn't just angry, she was armed. The dinner party explosion was merely the opening act of a much larger drama. The real reckoning, the systemic confrontation, unfolded in the charged weeks and months that followed. News of Secure Health's staggering valuation and imminent IPO with the juicy detail of Goldman Sachs. Thomas Mitchell's hallowed ground leading the charge spread like wildfire through Boston's tight-knit elite, and then, with dizzying speed, to the national business press. The Mitchell family, for so long the arbiters of my perceived inadequacy, suddenly found their carefully polished public image inextricably, and for them, uncomfortably linked to the black sheep they had so spectacularly misjudged. James's clumsy attempt to insinuate himself into Secure Health's IPO at my office was just the first of many opportunistic overtures. Next came my father. Thomas Mitchell, a man whose summons I had once dreaded, requested a meeting, not in his imposing office at Goldman, nor over a stiff brandy at his exclusive club, but at my office in Kendall Square. The tectonic shift in power was almost palpable. He arrived looking uncharacteristically subdued. His usual air of command diminished his Savile Row suit, seeming out of place amidst the vibrant creative energy of Secure Health. "Cara," he began, perched awkwardly on the edge of a sleek, modern guest chair in my glass-walled office, a chair that seemed to visibly offend his traditional sensibilities. "This Secure Health, it's more substantial than I initially perceived." "Yes, Father," I replied evenly, waiting. My internal monologue was a whirlwind, but outwardly I projected calm. This was not the time for old hurts to dictate my responses. This was about establishing new terms. "Your mother and I, well, perhaps we misjudged the situation." A classic Mitchell non-apology. "We have always fundamentally wanted what was best for you." "Did you?" I asked, my voice quiet but devoid of tremor. "Or did you want what conformed to your narrow definition of best, a definition that conveniently prioritized James's ambitions and Madison's social climbing while dismissing mine as a gimmick? Did you consider what it cost me year after year to be met with that wall of disapproval?" He visibly bristled, a flash of his old imperiousness returning. "There's no need for such accusatory dramatics, Cara. The salient point is, we are your family. We should be involved. I possess considerable financial acumen. I could advise your board guide the company's long-term investment strategy." I let him finish his unsolicited pitch. Then I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "Father, for over a decade I craved a shred of your belief, a word of encouragement, a moment where you saw my potential, not just my deviation from your plan." I shared my ideas, my small, hard-won victories, and they were met with condescension, or at best, a patronizing pat on the head. You threatened to financially disinherit me to motivate me towards a path you deemed appropriate at the very precise moment my company was on the verge of a $40 million validation from one of the world's largest investment funds. I paused, letting the weight of my words fill the space between us. My voice, my vision, my relentless hard work. None of it mattered to you then. Why precisely should your financial acumen matter to me now when it's offered only because my gimmick is suddenly a $100 million headline? Secure Health has an exceptional board of directors, a brilliant CFO in Alicia, and a team of highly qualified financial advisors. We are, as they say, well covered. Thank you for your belated concern. He didn't argue. He didn't bluster. He simply stared his face, a mask of complex, warring emotions. He left my office not with anger, but with the dawning, profoundly unsettling realization that the daughter he had so consistently underestimated now held all the cards. My success wasn't just revenge. It was irrefutable proof of my competence, my vision. I didn't just prove them wrong, I proved myself right to myself, which was the only validation that ultimately mattered. The ensuing weeks brought a cascade of cringeworthy moments. The social media post from Madison was a masterpiece of revisionist history. A few days after a glowing profile of me and Secure Health graced the pages of the Wall Street Journal, Madison, my family princess sister, posted a slightly blurry, artfully vintage-filtered photo of us as awkward teenagers on her impeccably curated Instagram feed. The caption gushed, overflowing with pride for my incredibly talented sister, Cara Mitchell, and the phenomenal success of Secure Health. The Mitchell family has always believed in nurturing extraordinary talent and game-changing innovation. So thrilled to see her shine, I stared at it, a mirthless laugh bubbling up. Nurturing extraordinary talent. Alicia, peering over my shoulder at my laptop, snorted with derision. The nerve of that woman. She should be in politics, her spin skills are world class. It was a stark public display of their desperate scramble to rebrand themselves as my lifelong champions. Then came the parents' spectacularly ill-suited gift attempt. A large, ostentatiously wrapped package from Shreve, Crump & Lowe arrived at my office. Inside, nestled on a bed of sapphire blue velvet, was an enormous antique diamond and ruby parure. A necklace, earrings, and bracelet set so heavy and ornate it looked like something disinterred from a Tsarina's tomb. It was a caricature of Mother's taste utterly alien to my minimalist aesthetic and modern lifestyle. The card in Mother's elegant script read, "Dearest Cara, we are simply bursting with pride at all you are achieving, a little something to celebrate your magnificent success and to wear at all the important events to come. With deepest love and admiration, Mother and Father." It was a gesture so profoundly clueless, so clearly demonstrating that despite my multi-million-dollar success, they still didn't see me, the real Cara, that it was almost heartbreaking. It was an attempt to buy back into my good graces, to adorn me with their version of success, to reclaim me as a Mitchell. I penned a polite, brief thank you note and quietly arranged for the parure to be the star lot at the next fundraising auction for the Mitchell Innovation Foundation I was in the process of establishing. Its sale would fund several scholarships for bright, underprivileged young women pursuing degrees in computer science. A much more fitting use for such a treasure, I thought. My siblings' reactions continued to be revealing. James, after his ego-bruising rejection at my office, became noticeably sullen and withdrawn in my presence. His golden child aura seemed to have irrevocably tarnished. His own steady, if uninspired ascent at Goldman now felt pedestrian compared to my explosive trajectory. He couldn't seem to handle being eclipsed, particularly by the sister he'd always airily dismissed. At a tense Easter brunch, Aunt Patricia had cajoled me into attending, for appearances, dear, and to give your mother a small victory she can crow about. James made the mistake of trying to patronizingly explain some basic principles of market capitalization to me in front of several distant relatives. I listened with polite patience, then gently but with unassailable precision corrected several of his fundamental misunderstandings, citing specific recent IPO performances and current SEC regulations. The silence that followed, punctuated only by the clinking of forks, was thick with his humiliation and the relative's poorly concealed surprise. He avoided financial topics, with me thereafter. My voice didn't just shake, it thundered with decades of suppressed truth and hard-won knowledge. Madison, ever the strategist, pivoted. If she couldn't diminish me, she would try to co-opt my shine. Invitations to her high-profile fundraisers, requests for me to sit on prestigious charity boards, she chaired suggestions for Power Sister, photo ops began to fill my inbox. My success was a new potent form of social currency she was eager to spend. I declined most politely but firmly, always citing the all-consuming demands of secure health. The true moment I realized the seismic shift in my own power wasn't in a boardroom showdown or a public triumph. It was a quiet Tuesday evening in my Back Bay townhouse. I was curled on my sofa, a glass of wine in hand, idly flipping through the latest issue of Forbes. And there I was on the cover, under the headline, Cara Mitchell, the tech maverick who hacked healthcare. It wasn't the image itself or the laudatory article that struck me. It was the profound, visceral absence of the old familiar anxieties, the gnawing need for their approval, the crippling fear of their disappointment, the constant, exhausting effort of trying to fit their mold. It had all simply evaporated, replaced by a quiet, unshakable certainty in my own worth, my own vision, my own path. The cage hadn't just been unlocked. I had dismantled it bar by bar and realized I had possessed the tools all along. I had just never dared to use them so boldly. The power wasn't new. I had just finally remembered it had always been there, buried beneath layers of conditioning. Liberation was a heady wine, but its intoxicating effects didn't magically erase a lifetime of ingrained family dynamics. The weeks and months following the IPO were a masterclass in boundary setting, my family disoriented by the sudden reversal of fortunes, and my newfound unshakable confidence struggled to adapt. Their old tactics of guilt manipulation and appeals to family loyalty were deployed with renewed, almost desperate vigor. This next chapter was about drawing lines in the sand, not with anger, but with the calm, resolute firmness of a woman who finally understood her own worth and was no longer willing to negotiate it. "But we're your family, Cara," Mother would lament during our now infrequent and carefully managed phone calls. Her voice, once capable of reducing me to a quivering mass of inadequacy, now sounded plaintive, almost bewildered. "Family is supposed to support each other, to share in each other's triumphs. We just want to be a part of your life, darling, to celebrate this wonderful success with you." "My definition of support, Mother, has evolved," I'd reply, keeping my tone even and free of accusation. For me, genuine support would have been a word of encouragement when secure health was just a dream and a mountain of debt. It would have been belief in my abilities when I was struggling to find my footing, attempting to bask in the reflected glory after the fact, or offering advice, now that the ship has already sailed into prosperous waters, doesn't quite fit that definition. The guilt trips were an art form they had perfected over decades. "You're being so distant, Cara. So cold. Are you deliberately trying to punish us for past misunderstandings? Don't you believe in forgiveness, in family loyalty above all else? I believe in mutual respect." I'd counter the words no longer catching in my throat. "And I am fiercely prioritizing my emotional well-being." For too many years, family peace was maintained at the direct expense of my own. That's a currency I'm no longer willing to spend. My loyalty is to authenticity, now Mother, both mine and yours, should you ever choose to find it. It wasn't easy. The good daughter programming, the deeply ingrained desire to please, to smooth over conflict, still whispered insidious suggestions in weaker moments. But my therapy sessions with Dr. Evans, my late-night strategy talks with Alicia, and especially the unwavering common-sense wisdom of Aunt Patricia, served as vital anchors, reinforcing my commitment to this new, healthier paradigm. Aunt Patricia was my steadfast lighthouse in the stormy seas of family readjustment. She became a regular visitor to Secure Health's bustling Kendall Square headquarters, her intelligent eyes alight with genuine, uncomplicated pride as she witnessed the thriving ecosystem I had built. During one such visit, as we sat in my sun-drenched office overlooking the Charles River, sharing a pot of Earl Grey tea, she opened up more about her own battles within the formidable Mitchell clan. "You know, Cara," she began, her gaze distant for a moment, "your grandfather, my father, Thomas Sr., was a lion of a man, brilliant, domineering, and possessed of an iron will. He had very, very specific expectations for me, his only daughter. A suitable marriage to someone from an equally prominent family, a life dedicated to managing a household and chairing the right charity committees. Sound familiar?" She gave me a wry, knowing smile. When I announced my intention to pursue a doctorate in English literature at Oxford, he nearly had an apoplexy. He threatened to cut me off entirely, declared my passion for poetry and prose a frivolous, unladylike indulgence, utterly unsuitable for a Mitchell woman destined for greater things. His words, not mine. I listened rapt. I'd always known Aunt Patricia was a rebel, but I hadn't grasped the true extent of her defiance. "I stood my ground, of course," she continued, a glint of her old fire in her eyes. "Packed my bags, took out loans, and went. It was a battle of wills that lasted for years. He eventually thawed. In his own taciturn, undemonstrative way, I think he even came to respect my independence. Much later, just before he died, he confessed to a friend who then told me that he was secretly rather proud of his blue-stocking daughter. He never quite managed to say it to my face, of course. Your father, Thomas Jr., inherited a good deal of that Mitchell rigidity, Cara, but perhaps not quite as much of his father's eventual capacity for introspection or admitting error." She paused, her gaze sweeping around my office, lingering on a framed photo of my Secure Health team celebrating a recent milestone. "You've created a family here." Patricia noted, her voice soft. "A chosen one, built on respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. And that my dear niece is an act of profound strength and wisdom." Her words, her story resonated deep within me. It wasn't just about my personal struggle. It was about breaking a generational pattern of patriarchal control, of daughters being molded rather than allowed to bloom. Understanding that Aunt Patricia had fought her own battles and that even my formidable grandfather had possessed hidden complexities deepened my resolve and broadened my perspective. There were immediate, tangible consequences for family members who failed to respect the new rules of engagement. When James, at a larger family holiday gathering, made a condescending remark about my luck in the tech boom laced with an implication that I hadn't truly earned my success, I didn't shrink or seethe in silence. I calmly, publicly, and with irrefutable data deconstructed his assertion, outlining the years of strategic planning, risk assessment, and relentless execution that had led to Secure Health's triumph. The ensuing discomfort was entirely his, not mine. The room observed, and the message was clear. Cara Mitchell was no longer an easy target. Distant relatives, clearly dispatched as flying monkeys by my parents to gauge my mood or apply subtle pressure, would occasionally call with syrupy concerns about my estrangement from the family. I developed a polite but unbreachable script. My relationship with my parents is a private matter between us, and I'm not prepared to discuss it further. Thank you for your call. Click. My new rules for interacting with my immediate family were clear and non-negotiable. Visits were infrequent, always on neutral territory. A restaurant, never the Brookline estate or my home, and with clearly defined start and end times. Topics of conversation were consciously steered away from my business unless I, and only I, chose to share specific curated updates. Any attempts at emotional blackmail, guilt-tripping, or unsolicited advice regarding my life or company were met with a calm but immediate verbal boundary. "Mother, I understand you're concerned, but I'm not going to continue this conversation if it becomes accusatory." Or, Father, I appreciate you sharing your perspective, but my strategic decisions regarding secure health are made in consultation with my board and executive team, and they are final. Madison remained an enigma. She continued her carefully calibrated attempts to align herself with my public success, peppering her social media with #sister goals whenever secure health hit a new milestone. Yet in rare, unguarded moments, I'd catch a flicker of something else in her eyes. Was it wistful envy, a dawning, uncomfortable question about the true fulfillment of her own meticulously plotted path? I maintained a polite professional distance. My energy was finite, and I chose to invest it in those who offered genuine support and reciprocity, not in trying to unravel the complex motivations of those who still seemed to view me primarily as a commodity or a reflection on them. Choosing my own well-being, my own serenity over the exhausting performative charade of family peace was perhaps the most revolutionary act of all. It was a profound declaration of self-worth, an acknowledgement that I deserved to be treated with respect and that I was no longer willing to trade my authenticity for conditional acceptance. My chosen family, Alicia, whose loyalty and brilliance were my daily ballast, my dedicated, passionate team at Secure Health, Aunt Patricia, my steadfast mentor and confidant, and a growing circle of supportive friends who celebrated my successes without agenda, provided the unconditional affirmation and intellectual stimulation that my biological family had so consistently withheld. And in that nourishing, respectful space, I didn't just survive. I began to truly, deeply thrive. The woman I was becoming would not tolerate what the girl had accepted, and that woman was finally fully in charge. The years that unfurled after the IPO and the establishment of my new firm boundaries were a testament to the transformative power of breaking free. Secure Health didn't just succeed, it soared. Our innovative approach to patient data security and interoperability became an industry benchmark. The successful public offering, managed with impeccable professionalism by a now deeply respectful and slightly awestruck team from Goldman Sachs, catapulted Secure Health, and by extension, me, onto a national stage. My face, once relegated to the background of stiff Mitchell family portraits, now graced the covers of Forbes, Fortune, and Wired. Not as a society heiress, but as a CEO, an innovator, a woman who had defied expectations and rewritten her own script. My personal life blossomed in ways I could scarcely have imagined during my years in the golden cage. I eventually moved from the elegant but somewhat formal Back Bay townhouse to a stunning custom-designed home in Cambridge. It was a space that reflected the woman I had become, light-filled modern with clean lines and expansive windows overlooking a tranquil garden. It was filled with contemporary art, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves groaning with everything from coding manuals to poetry, and a state-of-the-art kitchen where I discovered a surprising passion for cooking elaborate meals for my chosen family. My career was no longer just a job, it was a calling. Leading Secure Health, working alongside Alicia and our brilliant team to solve complex problems that genuinely improved people's lives, provided a profound sense of purpose and fulfillment that no amount of inherited wealth or social standing could ever have offered. But my definition of success had expanded beyond corporate achievements. I established the Mitchell Innovation Foundation, its mission to provide scholarships, mentorship, and seed funding for young women pursuing careers in STEM fields. The irony of using the Mitchell name, a name once synonymous with my oppression, as a banner for female empowerment was a source of private, satisfying amusement. Addressing auditoriums packed with bright, ambitious young women sharing my story, the edited for public consumption version, of course, but with the core message of resilience intact and seeing the spark of recognition, hope, and determination in their eyes, that became one of my most cherished rewards. I was determined to be the role model, the source of encouragement that I had so desperately craved in my own youth. The best revenge I discovered isn't just living well. It's becoming the woman they said you couldn't be, and then dedicating yourself to dismantling the barriers for those who come after you. The dynamics with my biological family settled into a new, more distant, but strangely more honest equilibrium. father, after a few more abortive attempts to dispense unsolicited strategic advice, eventually seemed to accept that I was an independent entity, a force operating outside his sphere of influence. Our conversations, though still infrequent, became less about him dictating terms and more, on his better days, about him asking tentative, almost curious questions about the rapidly evolving tech landscape. A world he was slowly, grudgingly beginning to acknowledge held a power and complexity he hadn't previously comprehended. Mother, ever the pragmatist and acutely attuned to social currents, seamlessly transitioned into her new role as the proud mother of Cara Mitchell, the tech visionary. She now boasted about "my daughter, the CEO," at her charity galas and society luncheons, her pronouncements laced with a newfound proprietary pride. It was still at its core about maintaining appearances, about leveraging my success for her own social capital, but the undercurrent of shame and disappointment that had once defined her attitude towards me was gone, replaced by a reflected glory she clearly relished. I accepted it with a detached amusement, understanding it for what it was, a transaction, not a transformation on her part. James, my golden child brother, remained a somewhat poignant figure. He achieved his vice presidency at Goldman Sachs as had always been preordained, but his career, while respectable, lacked the dazzling meteoric trajectory he and the family had always assumed was his birthright. He was competent, diligent, but ultimately unexceptional. The effortless shine of his youth had faded, revealing someone more ordinary, perhaps even a little bewildered, by a world that no longer automatically deferred to his name and connections. Our interactions were civil, carefully polite, and blessedly infrequent. Madison, true to her lifelong ambition, married a charismatic, up-and-coming political figure and seamlessly transitioned into the role of the poised, influential, and impeccably dressed political spouse. Her Instagram feed was a masterpiece of curated perfection. I genuinely hoped she found fulfillment in the life she had so meticulously engineered, but I couldn't help but wonder if in the quiet moments she ever questioned the choices made, the authentic parts of herself that might have been sacrificed on the altar of ambition and expectation. Aunt Patricia, however, remained my staunchest ally, my wisest counselor, my most beloved family member. Our bond, forged in shared experiences of Mitchell patriarchy and strengthened by mutual respect and genuine affection, was a precious, unshakable constant in my life. My chosen family, Alicia, my brilliant and irreverent COO, who knew my every strength and vulnerability and loved me for both. My dedicated, passionate team at Secure Health, who shared my vision and celebrated every triumph as their own, and a close-knit circle of friends and mentors from diverse fields, provided the intellectual stimulation, emotional support, and unconditional acceptance that had been so conspicuously absent from my upbringing. I even found love, a healthy, vibrant relationship with a wonderful man, an architect who celebrated my intelligence and ambition, who saw my strength not as a threat, but as an intrinsic part of who I was. A stark, wonderful contrast to the suitable but ultimately stifling partners my mother might once have shortlisted for me. Looking back on the arduous journey, the acute pain of my family's chronic dismissal, their casual cruelty, their profound inability to see me for who I truly was, remained a tangible memory. But I also recognized with the hard-won clarity that comes from deep healing and self-acceptance that their very opposition, their relentless attempts to diminish me, had inadvertently forged my resilience, my unwavering self-reliance, my ferocious determination to prove not just them, but more importantly myself, wrong about my perceived limitations. The fire they had tried so desperately to extinguish had instead been fanned into an unstoppable blaze. I was no longer the shrinking woman, the invisible daughter, the family disappointment. I was Cara Mitchell, CEO, innovator, philanthropist, mentor. A woman who had not just found her voice, but had amplified it to resonate with power, purpose, and profound joy. My happiness wasn't a petty act of spite. It was a beacon inspiring others to find their own light. I had risen from the ashes of their narrow expectations, a phoenix reborn, entirely transformed, and finally, deeply, unshakably at peace. The cage was a distant memory. The sky was now limitless. My story, in its essence, isn't a solitary tale. It's a narrative that echoes in the quiet heartaches and unspoken frustrations of countless women, daughters, sisters who have been systematically conditioned to be smaller, quieter, more accommodating than their spirits truly yearn to be. The specific stage may change, the family dynamics, the cultural pressures, the particular flavor of dismissal. But the core struggle is universal. We are too often taught to apologize for our brilliance, to dim our own vibrant light for the comfort and convenience of others, especially within the patriarchal structures that still define so many families. I used to be the daughter who apologized for taking up space, who shrank herself to fit the cramped confines of others' expectations. Today, I stand before you not as an anomaly, but as a testament to the power that resides within every woman, and I say, with every fiber of my being, take up space. Your voice is not an interruption. It is a vital contribution. Your dreams are not frivolous. They are the blueprints of a better future. Your ambition is not a character flaw. It is your God-given engine. If you're tired of playing the good girl while your soul quietly suffocates, if you feel that familiar chafing irritation of being underestimated, patronized, or outright dismissed, I see you, I recognize you, and I want you to know with absolute certainty that you are not alone in this fight. I urge you to examine your own family dynamics, the unspoken rules, the generational patterns that may be holding you captive. Are you dimming your light to avoid conflict? Are you sacrificing your authentic self on the altar of family peace? Recognize these patterns not to dwell in blame, but to consciously, courageously liberate yourself from their hold. The woman I was becoming would not tolerate what the girl had accepted, and neither should you. We as women need to collectively stop apologizing for our strength, our intelligence, our drive. We need to champion each other to teach our daughters, our nieces, our friends, and ourselves that our worth is inherent, unshakable, and utterly non-negotiable, not dependent on anyone else's validation or approval. We must forge a global sisterhood that actively celebrates female ambition, that fiercely protects our right to dream big, that lifts each other up when the world, or even the people closest to us, tries to tear us down. This profound journey of reclaiming your power, your voice, your life, begins with the radical act of trusting your own perceptions, of valuing your own needs, of recognizing your own inherent worth, even, and especially when others fail to do so. It's about finding the courage to use your voice, even if it trembles at first. It's about drawing firm, healthy boundaries and fiercely defending your emotional and intellectual sovereignty. If my story has resonated with you, if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, often in the same breath, I invite you to join this conversation. Comment "Me Too" below if you're ready to break free. Share this story if you passionately believe that women deserve to occupy all the space they need to shine brilliantly. Tag a woman in your life. A friend, a sister, a colleague, a daughter who needs to hear this message of empowerment today, a woman who is ready to stop shrinking and start roaring. Subscribe if you're ready to stop apologizing for your ambition, ready to shatter outdated expectations, and determined to architect a life that is authentically, joyfully, and unapologetically yours. My awakening didn't happen in a single flash of lightning, but was a gradual, persistent dawn that ultimately changed everything. Yours can too. Let's continue to share these stories, to amplify each other's voices, to build this unstoppable sisterhood. Because every single woman has the fundamental right to rise to thrive and to rewrite her own damn narrative. The revolution doesn't just begin with you, it is you.